Good afternoon and welcome again. My name is John Coatsworth. I'm the acting dean of the School of International and Public Affairs here at Columbia, and I have a rather odd task in front of me. Introducing Fernando Henrique Cardoso to people from Latin America or who know Latin America is a little bit like introducing the Pope to the College of Cardinals. It makes for a nice ceremony, but it's totally unnecessary. So I'll be very brief, and President Cardoso will make his remarks from where he is seated now. Fernando Henrique Cardoso was born in Rio de Janeiro, but has lived most of his life in Sao Paulo, except for the years which he spent in exile in the United States, France, and elsewhere. He was professor of political science and sociology at USP, at the University of Sao Paulo, for many years. When he returned during the period of transition to democracy in Brazil, he first entered public life as a candidate for the Senate from the state of Sao Paulo, to which he was elected in 1982. He was then re-elected in 1986 and again in 1992, each as a candidate for a new political party that he had founded. From October 1992 to May 1993, he served as Minister of Foreign Affairs under President Itamar Franco. And from May 1993 until April 1994, he was Minister of Finance, in which capacity he introduced the Plan Real, which, as you may remember, those of you who are old enough, was enormously successful in bringing under control the very rapid inflation which was eating into living standards and undermining the economy of Brazil in the period after the transition. As president during 8 years, he faced incredible challenges. In a period of intense international and global financial and economic instability, he managed to steward the economy of Brazil during a period of extraordinary macroeconomic stability, and even managed to do so during a period in which his own Plan Real had to be abandoned in favor of devaluing the real and confronting very difficult international circumstances. While maintaining macroeconomic stability, he also managed to begin introducing to Brazil a series of policy and social reforms, the consequences of which are still benefiting the country today. The innovative reforms that his government put into effect in the areas of education and health and other aspects of social policy have been the foundation for more recent policies followed by the Brazilian government under his successor, President Lula. Of all of President Cardoso's writings, which I enjoyed the most, except, I suppose, for the first on dependency and underdevelopment in Latin America, which I think still bears reading, my favorite is his most recent book, The Accidental President of Brazil, which he published in 2006. I recommend it to all of you. It's still in the bookstores. President Cardoso.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Caldwell. You said that is a hard task to introduce me. Hard task is what I have to do now, because I was invited to come here and I received, some of my assistants received information, and you sent to me 10 specific questions on my experience as president I have here. And I have been all my life a good student, so I replied question by question. And then suddenly I realized that no, I have to make to speak to a normal group of people, so I prefer to speak to you from here, because if I go there, the tendency toward demagoguery for an old political man is terrible. So I think it's better to stay here, to be more calm, to address you, and to try to be at least as, how can I put, interesting what I will say to you. It will be very difficult compared to what I listen all day long. It was a very, very good seminar, very, very good encounter. So it was to me really a surprise, a double surprise, to make a speech now and to see that I have lots of things yet to learn. I learned a lot today. And what are the main questions that I think have to be stressed, extracting from what have been our discussion today about Latin America? First of all, it's a complete reversal situation compared to the, let's put 20 years ago or 15 years ago. A complete reverse situation. Everyone now realizes that Latin America, well, is no more a hopeless continent. For different reasons. You remember that when we regain impetus in our democratic process in Latin America, it coincides with the end of the Cold War, as well with the fact that globalization is inescapable. We have to face globalization. So it was a very, very difficult challenge to respond, because we had, for one side, democracy, on the other side, poverty, on the other side, competitiveness at the global level, altogether, and with a bureaucratic state, old-fashioned kind of state. So this was a very tremendous challenge to be responded by different countries in Latin America. Responses were not equal. I think what has been said just now by Ambassador Munoz is very, very important. You cannot look at Latin America anymore as a homogeneous space. It's not an homogeneous space. That's not to say that you don't have commonalities, as Munoz stressed. But you cannot speak anymore of Latin America as a homogeneous space. On the other hand, it's impossible to, by consequence, to give similar answers. In this morning, we started a very lively debate, not debate because all of the speakers were in coincidence, a very lively presentation on the economic conditions in Latin America nowadays. And it is also clear, after what has been said here, that now we have, well, growth. Well, in the past, the idea was Latin America is not capable to regain impetus to growth. As a Brazilian, the idea of growth for us has been in the last couple of years a nightmare. Because if you look data across time, the fact is, if you look Brazil from 1947 up to the 80s, the average rate of growth was of 7.5%. 97, because it's the beginning of our records on growth. 7.5%. Only Japan had a more impressive rate of growth. As an average, the developing countries were growing up at 5% as an average from 47 up to 8. It was a period of growth. And then you had, stagnation in the 80s. So the possibility to regain a drive toward growth was a permanent nightmare. And now it's a dream. Because in fact, our region is going up with unevenness, but then how, as altogether, the data have been very clear. In my career, mainly after being a political man, the external debt was, again, a tremendous obstacle to change, to development. We used to speak about external debt day and night. Now, the data this morning were very clear. We are now financing foreign investments because we have surplus in our current accounts in several countries in Latin America. And the point is that I know that there are some fiscal problems. I know that to some extent it's true what has been stressed this morning by Ocampo, the fact that the enormous amount of our reserves correspond also to an enormous inflow of capital. So we have to have reserves. This maybe could disappear, but anyhow we have reserves. If you compare our reserves and our debt, probably we have a positive result. In the case of Brazil, certainly we have a positive result. So this is completely new from what has been our experience in Latin America in the past. External indebtedness is no more a big problem. So it's fantastic to see what has been also said this morning here, the resilience of the Latin American economy vis-a-vis an eventual crisis in the USA. And that's not just because we are better off in terms of inflow of capitals, etc., but also because we diversified a lot our economies. It's amazing, but this has been stressed several times this morning in the afternoon here. It is amazing the fact that some countries practically have a very thin relationship with the United States, including my own country. 18% of Brazilian exports came to USA, 18%, compared to 19% from Mexico. But Chile's as well is a limited part of the export oriented toward the United States. And meanwhile, a new phenomenon, China. Who could imagine 15 years ago or 20 years ago that China will be client number 2 in Brazil, and probably several other countries. So number 2 is China, is going up. Huh? So we are facing a quite new world. And this new world, at the beginning, was very difficult to tame. Very, very difficult. Because we had not enough flexibility in our institutions and in our mind to understand the strategic decisions important for the nation. At the beginning, it was extremely difficult for each one of our nations to understand, first of all, that it will be necessary to reduce tariffs. I was, as has been said, most of you know, finance minister. I was finance minister in 93, 94. And so I came after President Collor de Mello, who has been impeached. And then another president, the vice president, replaced him. And Collor de Mello started the opening up of the Brazilian economy. When I was appointed as finance minister, you can't imagine the pressure I received from my friends from my own state of Sao Paulo, the industrialists from Sao Paulo, by saying, you have to stop. It is a crazy thing to reduce the external tariffs. We cannot compete. It will undermine the Brazilian assets in industry, so on and so forth. It was extremely hard to continue to reduce tariffs, and yet to have a relatively high level of tariffs in Brazil. And why? Because, as I said to you, the way how we had been capable to grow at a very high rate of growth was because we had protection and state inversion in productive system. Most of our countries, in a long period of time, have developed because of that, because they have protection and the state had the capacity to extract taxes and to use tax to invest in productive system. That was the way to get development. It was correct, but the world changed. And it's difficult to adjust quickly to what is going on in our environment. So this was in the 80s, at the end of the 80s and beginning of the 90s. So we did. Several countries have been capable to start to become more integrated. Well, easy to say, difficult to implement, and have some additional considerations necessary to understand what the possibilities are and to what extent can we go through that mechanism. In the 90s, and this has been also discussed this morning, the idea was, well, provide each one of the Latin American or developing countries would introduce some reforms, then these countries will be capable to compete and to go ahead and to become integrated at the global level. This was being called the Washington Consensus as a label. I must say to you that when I was in the presidency, when they started speaking to me about the Washington Consensus, I had no idea. I tried to what's that? What's that? This is because I read in newspaper that I was trying to implement a new liberal policy based on the Washington Consensus. What is that, my God? Well, I had no idea. Because this is an oversimplification. Our nation had words, different preconditions to solve the questions and different strategies to try to overcome difficulties and to get more capable to continue a process of growth. So this is why we have to emphasize the differentiation among it, as well as the differentiation in terms of the recipes, because there are no recipes for development. Each nation has to build a proper system, a proper accommodation of institutions, to have to defend some goals, to have the capacity to mobilize people to go ahead with the policies, so on and so forth. Look from now, looking back, it's obvious that we had to face the obstacles I mentioned before. That is to say, to redemocratize, open up the economy, rebuild the state apparatus, and start fighting in reducing poverty and later on inequalities. It's now you can divide, yes. We have accomplished some of these goals, not completely, but this have been the main challenge we had to face. Okay, but from what starting point, and using what kind of strategies, to what extent are really necessary to remove the already existing institutions. Each nation took quite different decision. It's absolutely untrue to imagine that Latin America in the 9th or the 8th or the 9th had a similar set of policies. It's not true. It's if you compare Chile, Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, so just to restrict to some countries, you see each one has a totally different approach to solve similar problems. We regained democracy. We had to integrate into world level. We had to readapt our institutions, and we have to see what to do with the people. Well, in some circumstances, the fiscal crisis was so profound because before that period, that moment, we had inflation, as we had very high levels of inflation, and we had the oil crisis in the late 70s and the 80s. So each one of these countries were in bad shape to try to integrate at the world level. Well, but what we did in each one of these countries, what was the path through which it would have been possible to engage in a new way into the markets. In the case of Brazil, we had to rebuild the state apparatus, but we had a state apparatus, more or less competent. The military regime left a very good state system in Brazil. The administration in Brazil was not that bad and was not undermined by the military. It was distorted in some areas, but was not undermined. On the other hand, the idea was, during the military regime, we had the government was investing directly in infrastructure and even industry. So if you look what happened there, you see that electricity was basically based on state investment. Oil, state company. Railroad, state companies. Mining, state companies, so on and so forth. So we had a very strong economy based on state investment. Meanwhile, and maybe with some correlation, because mainly in the 6th and 7th, the capacity of the state to invest was very high, but the state decided not to go faster in social investments. So education, situation of disarray. Public health, situation of disarray. I wrote a book in the 70s in São Paulo, named São Paulo, Growth and Poverty. At that time, it was clear that the rate of growth was enormous, but every one of social indicators coming down. Infant mortality, so on and so forth. So when we started the redemocratization process in the 80s, people's demand was very strong in order to get more health, more education, agrarian reform, so on and so forth. So it would be impossible for the government to use the taxes to invest in industry instead of had to invest in social areas. So inflation and the lack of possibility to invest more steadily in the productive system. What to do? Well, we decide to privatize. We decide to privatize some industries. But the Brazilian decision to privatize was not a zero-sum game. It was not to destroy everything. On the contrary, we decided to remove the state bureaucracy, organize regulators, agencies to take care of the privatized areas, to impose competition, and to keep in the hands of the government several parts of the productive system. So if you go to Brazil, we never destroyed the financial system from the hands of the state are still there. If you look at the financial system in Brazil, the number one bank is the Banco do Brasil, belongs to the federal government. Number two is Caixa Econômica, also belongs to federal government. Number three is Brazilian bank, namely Bradesco. Number four, the Brazilian bank, namely Itaú. Number 50, the Brazilian bank. Number 50, 60, this is a Spanish bank. So we kept not just the capacity that the government has to control some parts of the economy, but also the Brazilian entrepreneurs were behind some parts of the economy. If you look at the infrastructure in Brazil, the electricity, the power system, well, what we did privatize the distribution of energy, but not generation of energy. The generation is basically in the hands of government in Brazil. I don't think it's necessary, maybe not. But the fact is, it's like that. We did privatize some important areas. We decided to privatize telecommunications and railroads. Telecommunications because the military advanced a lot in the area of telecommunications. But we stagnate because of the lack of additional investment and because of the change in technology. So the decision would be either to keep the telecommunication in the hands of the state and not making the necessary transformation in the whole system, as a consequence, not being capable to introduce IT, to introduce the computers, so on and so forth, or to privatize. We decided to privatize. If you look what happened now, and you compare in 1997-98 in Brazil, we had 800,000 cell phones. Today, 120 million cell phones. 120 million cell phones. If you look what happened with the computers, again, like in Chile, the access to, the connectiveness is enormous. So just to give you a brief idea, last year, to send forms to the Internal Revenue System, 99% of the forms have been sent through internet. 99% through internet. So this is the result of the privatization. It was necessary because you had no possibility to continue to keep the pace and compete with other countries without being very, very fast in the area of telecommunications. So we decided to privatize. But we decided to privatize, and as I said, we create a regulatory agency. So, and so on and so forth, in different areas. In the oil system, we decided not to privatize, but to compete. So we decided to force the Brazil oil company, Petrobras, to become more, to work as a corporation. Petrobras has IPOs in New York and so on and so forth. It's a big enterprise. The result was very, very spectacular in terms of because of the oil price too. In the case of the mining system, we decided to privatize. It was extremely difficult to privatize CVRD, which is a Brazilian company, was a state company. We did it, and it was a public auction, and the price was around, suppose, $8 or $9 billion. Some years later on, the value was maybe a little bit less. Then, because of the privatization, because of the boom in terms of metals in China, the CVRD market value today is higher than Petrobras. That is to say, is about $140 billion. So from time to time, the people criticize the privatization process. You made a gift by privatizing for buying 10 billion. But at the time, the market value was 10 billion. And now it's 140 billion, because not just because of China, but also because the CBRD works like a corporation. And when these two companies, big companies, were in the hands of the state, the political infiltration was very high, as well as corruption as a consequence. Every party was to appoint a director of Petrobras, director of CBRD, so on, and not to speak about the telecommunication system, was like that too. So this was not just because of corruption, but also because it lacks, capacity to cope with the market's demands. It's much more, it took more time to take a decision, it has to negotiate with parts, so on and so forth. So because we transformed even the state companies like Petrobras into true corporation, now the performance is quite good. Compared with what has been done in Argentina. They did privatize, but in a quite different way. Very, very often, without having good regulatory agencies. And the tariffs went up and not down. On the other hand, very often also, not just in Argentina, the privatization has had as a consequence another kind of monopoly, the private monopoly, not competition. What is good is not to be private or to be state. What is good is to compete, is to break monopoly. So, in Argentina, the ideas they had at one point, mainly when President Menem was there, the idea really was much more close to what has been considered as the Washington consensus. That is to say, let's replace the state by the market. That's not Washington consensus, an exaggeration of that. But anyhow, let's replace the state by the market. Other countries like Chile or Brazil, we never did that. We made a kind of blend, made a combination, depending on local situations, depending on our interests. So in order to continue what has been discussed this morning, it's necessary, I think, another idea, another blend, but not only one. You have to see, each country will try to see what is better for the country. But if you consider in more general and structural terms, it is also true that if you look what maybe could be behind what has been discussed today here, the main variables which affects the procedures and behavior of people in different nations, there are some basic questions to be stressed. One is the productive differentiation degree. Some countries are basically organized around one main item. Normally a raw material, oil, for instance. Or it was no more the case of Chile, copper, but the gas in Bolivia. Well, with very little productive differentiation. Other countries have been, this is not now, it is a historical process, but other countries have been capable to differentiate much more the productive system. They have industry, agriculture, service, so on and so forth. It's not the same thing to respond to the challenge of the globalization in a country highly diversified in its economy, compared to a country based basically in one raw material. It's quite different. So I think you have to look at that. You have to look at the economic differentiation, because the economic differentiation implies also several kinds of social differentiation. Different kinds of social relationships, social straight being formed. It depends on the basic economic differentiation. The second maybe basic structural factor which plays a role in allowing us to understand how are so different response in Latin America is exactly what I said just before. The degree to which the government has been capable to create a competent administration, a state apparatus. Some countries have a tradition of having a state. Chile has, Mexico has, Brazil has, Colombia to some extent has. Oh, no, don't. Never had. It's not because of globalization. Never had. So these factors will affect the way how these countries have the capacity or not to define strategies to cope with globalization and also to cope with in domestic problems. How to reduce poverty, how to take care of people's health without having a relatively competent state apparatus. So these are maybe the main structural facts behind the fragmentation, behind the differentiation that now is notable when you compare one country to another one. But it's not just that. There is a political element which also has to be included to understand the whole process. Some countries have been capable to define goals, and the goals varies from country to country. And some have been capable to enforce the goals, enforce policies toward goals. And some countries have been capable to do it in continuity, others don't. So this introduces enormous differentiation when we compare one nation with the other nation. It's quite different if the country was capable to define some goals or not. These are not technocratic decisions. It's not the fact that a group of intellectuals or technocrats are together to prepare a document to say what the nation wants. No. This is something that came from the nation itself, from the day-by-day life, and not necessarily with the awareness of people, but people step by step converge vis-a-vis some goals. In the case of democracy, this is very important to stress, practically in all nations we are converging in the sense that democracy is a value. In the sense to know what to do in terms of our relation with the global system is not that clear. Some nations don't have yet the sense that it is possible, necessary, and good to integrate the global order, because you can gain some results from that. What has been said just now by Ambassador Munoz about Chile is a clear example of the positive decision to be integrated, and this has been accepted by different sides of society, and not to fear competition. I think that Chile is an exemplary case, because if you look the base of the Chilean economy, comparing to Brazil, to Argentina, or to Mexico, or even to Colombia, well, it was not clear that Chile had the possibility to integrate so well. But the Chileans took the decision. They had the capacity to converge. The converge is not to say that they have the same ideas, but they know that as an average, every Chilean understands that it's important for Chile to organize in order to expand exports and to amplify the exportations partners. And they did that. And they did that exporting oyster, for instance. This is something very impressive. How to use the oysters to transform salmon. 30 years ago, salmon for the rich people. Now we can eat salmon. I can. Because of Chile. They invented salmon in Chile. Well, I lived in Chile in the 60s. I never heard about a word about salmon. Then they invented salmon. They invented oysters. They had already wine. But they improved their wine. They invented new labels to put on the wine's bottle, and they controlled the trade circuit. They understood that label, design, the control of the trade circuit is as important as to produce steel. So this is important to understand. They have the necessary insights to say, well, we have this as a possibility. If we work together and if we go there, we will be successful. They have been successful. Not because of Cooper. They had Cooper always. Now Cooper's price is very high. It's okay. But then this was not the base for the Chilean development. The base was another thing. Yeah? And it was also to improve in the area of services, to take the advantage that they have fruits in non-coincidence with the fruits in the north, in the production of fruits, so on and so forth. Well, they define a strategy. Then the same strategy is in continuity for a long time. This is also very important. It's impossible to change a nation with ups and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs. And this has been the characteristic of Latin America up to very recently, ups and downs. Now, Chile has steadily going toward some goals. And in the case of Chile, they had also the political sophistication to turn a possible stable relationship between two ancient enemies. When I was living in Chile, the Christian Democrat and the Socialists, my God. The Socialists were much more radical than the Communists, I might say. And the Christians, social-Christians, Democratic Christians, Christian Democrats in Chile, well, they are considered as maybe conservatives. Huh? So now they are together, very happy. I think so, I don't know, I'm not sure. We never know. Let's see the coming elections. But then they have been capable to do that for a long time. For a long time. This is very important. Compare with Brazil. Probably in terms of Brazil, we are much more gifted in terms of resources than Chile. Not just because of agriculture, but also because of the minerals, and also because we have an industry. Well, I would say Brazilians have been smart enough to understand that it was necessary to continue to engage at the global level. And now I can give you the example of those of Brazilian companies who are global companies. And we are capable even to export to America aircraft. Not that bad. So this is okay. But anyhow, to achieve these results, Brazil was so painful, much more painful than in Brazil. Because it was, in the end, not clear for Brazilians that you had the possibility to compete. Brazil were much more, shy in that sense than the Chileans. And the opposite what appears. But it's fact that Brazil have been much more modest in having the notion that for Brazil would be better to be more competitive than to be based only on the domestic market. As a result of this kind of ideological difficulties to understand how the situation is now and how are the chances we have looking ahead, we had an enormous variety in the Brazilian political spectrum about the image regarding what is good for Brazil. Even today you go there and say. And then we have a strange situation in Brazil, very strange situation, because our party system is a party system fragile, as there are different ones in Latin America, but with some characteristics. The main parties are incapable to produce presidents, which is strange. That's fact. So there are two. If you look for comparing the Chilean politics with Brazilians, it's very, very interesting. Because in Chile they have a party system, much more traditional, much more European style, and they have been able to cooperate, to fuse and to cooperate. In Brazil is a fragmentation of parties, and the biggest one, named PMDB, Partido Democrático Brasileiro, something like that, is the biggest one. I was leader of that party. Is incapable to appoint one candidate for the presidency. Meanwhile, there are two poles in Brazilian politics. The PT, Working Class Party, and the PSDB, Social Democratic Party. Well, these two poles are competing very furiously since ever. Well, why? When I was elected, when I was in government, the PT criticized everything I did. Then Lula came to power. Well, to my surprise, to follow everything I did. Yeah. So we realized. It's true. So we realized realize that the point is power. Who has the position in power? But what is bad is not that, it's normal. What is bad is the way to get more powerful or to intend to get more power is to criticize the main ideas of other and then to enforce the same ideas. But this prevents a convergence. It prevents to understand that it would be much better to go in continuity and not to produce kinds of instability. If you look what happened in the year 2002, well, the financial markets, my God, the Brazilian currency or real multiplied by 2 or 3, and then came down because Lula was not what the others perceived him as being, or himself believed he could be another thing. But it would be much better to have some degree of convergence. I don't say that to merge like in Chile, but then have some kind of, but no, our political system depends on this kind of phantasmagoric opposition between two poles, and these two poles to govern had to make alliances with the clientelist parties, corrupted people, so on and so forth, because alone they have not enough strength in Congress to govern. So this is not a consequence of structures. This is not a consequence of socio-political situation. It's a consequence of the failure of our system leadership, myself and others, and of the political system, Brazilian political system, to create an environment more favorable to the nation, in summing up. So, you see, Chile had, at the beginning, maybe less possibilities to engage positively in a path toward development than Brazil. And if you compare the rate of growth of Brazil and Chile in the last 15 years, no comparison. It's not just because of that. It's not just because of the fact that the Chileans have been capable to propose goals and to unite. There are other questions as well. But this has some weight in the output, decreasing our capacity to go faster, at least, to get the goals we are wishing to get. It's true also that you have to look at the internal situation in different countries, not just in Brazil and in Chile. It's not the same to reduce poverty when you have, 30% and you have 60%. If you look at the data we showed this morning about Bolivia or about Ecuador, my God, they are in a situation of despair. It's extremely difficult. And if you look at the elements they have to cope to try to reduce poverty, it's a very limited amount of instruments available to do that. It's not the same. But it's also true that because of that, when we look the forecast about to what extent democracy is well rooted in Latin America, is it possible to have a kind of backward views toward populism, so on and so forth? You have to take into account that's not just because of populism, it's because of the situation, because of the fact that democracy in some circumstances, in some countries, was not capable to solve people's problems. So there is no hope for these people. I'm not saying that in Brazil everything is okay. It's not okay. If you look, we reduce poverty from maybe 40-45% before the real plan to 30% with the real plan, and now 23% because of cash transfer, the increase of minimum wage, education, so on and so forth. 23% of the Brazilian population. We are now about 200 million people. So we have 50 million people below the poverty line. So it's not a wonderful situation. So, and why in Brazil we are not expecting something as a non-democratic pattern or path? Because in practice, the Brazilian population has some hope. And the hope is based in concrete facts. Social mobility. There is social mobility there. And then if you look, including the survey that has been referred today here, about how the youth is looking ahead and how the parents are looking ahead, there is some disparities. The parents are much more confident on the future than the youth, because the youth is facing the problem of employment. This is true. But anyhow, the fact is that in some countries it's possible, even for those who are in bad shape, to imagine that the sons will be better off. And so this is an element to help us to understand why it's not we are not living in an exploding situation. Because we are moving ahead. We are moving ahead, anyhow, in spite of all difficulties. But we have also to understand that some countries are not moving ahead. Look, Bolivia. Now everyone is maybe a little bit astonished with what has been done in Bolivia. They decide to nationalize Petrobras investments there. Of course, Brazilians are not very happy with that. But we have to understand why. Maybe if Brazilians before be much more competent in dealing with Bolivia, in offering some joint ventures in petrochemicals, so on and so forth, it would be possible to avoid the decision made by Morales. So, but Morales, since he was the first ever indigenous man who became president, he has an enormous historical burden, and he has to reply to this Bolivia's demand. He has to increase the national, earnings. So Morales now he has more money available to do don't know what, but he has money in his hand because of gas. I think it would be possible to take a different path. Maybe the decision made by Morales and now maybe President Correa as well, at long run could be doubtful, because it's obvious too that Petrobras will be much more cautious in investing additional money in Bolivia. In Brazil, will try to like the Chileans, to look for the natural gas from other parts of the world. From the Brazilians are considered to bring to Brazil gas from the Emirates, which is crazy if you have Bolivia or plenty of gas. This is also because of the political decision of Bolivia. I understand why Morales took the decision, but I'm not justifying, because I think maybe it was not a more clever decision. But clever or not clever, for him was okay, for us was bad. It would be much better to have something capable to satisfy both parts, and this it will be possible. Maybe yet it's possible. Well, so what I'm saying to you is you have to look much more in depth each country to understand why in some cases you have one decision, another case you have another decision, why some outputs are very positive, others are not that positive. This is not a mechanic thing. It depends on structural variables, as well as it depends on the way how in each nation all these things are processed at the ideological level and at the political level, and how can we enforce different policies. Anyhow, after what has been discussed today, it's also quite clear that in Latin America now we know what to do. Maybe it's to assert to say that we know what to do, but I think we know what to do basically. I think that we learn that we have, regarding macroeconomic policies, we have to be capable to control inflation. Everyone knows that, and it was extremely difficult to control inflation. Now it's nothing. Now we know the instruments are already available, and we are trying to control inflation. We know that we cannot, a long run, to control inflation and to control and to have good economic results if we will be not capable to take more care of the governmental expenditure. This is a tremendous question mark. To what extent our governments will be capable to understand that the good moment we are living in is a moment, and we have to take the benefit of that moment to make the necessary transformations to assure at long run continuity in our process of development. It's not clear. If you look in the case of some countries, I refer to Argentina or to Brazil, you'll see that the public expenses are going up higher than GDP, with a velocity higher than GDP. In our case, we are increasing 10% per year in the public expenses in Brazil, the government expense, and what is still worse, not in public investment. This is normally in ordinary expenses, that is to say, people. We are engaging more employees. So it's not the question of having a big or a small state. We have to have a competent state. And a competent state is a state capable to understand the overall situation and efficient. And the number of people is not equal to efficiency. From time to time, to have many public employees is the opposite. It's not increasing of competence, but it's the contrary. So in some cases, I think you have also to look at how the governments are performing, and in spite of the good moment, maybe we are undermining our future. That's not applied for every country, but it's difficult when we are booming to say, well, that is the moment to restrain expenses. That is the moment for the counter-cyclical policies. Only a few countries have been capable to have this sense of counter-cyclical policy. Normally, when you are booming, we prefer to expand our expenses. There are other problems related to the taxation, the tax system, which is quite obvious that the tax system in most of Latin America is regressive. And what is worse, in most of Latin American countries, the tax system is not capable to give resources to take care of social policies. I don't know how is it possible. In Brazil, we have maybe as an average, today was said 38% of the fiscal pressure. I think it's less, it's 36% of GDP. But 36% is double compared to the average in Latin America. So I think that we have to take into account that the tax system in Latin America is unjust, regressive, and it's not, in some cases, it is not sufficient to really allow the state to continue to make progress. So I think that altogether, I like to have a kind of more open dialogue with you and have the question that you asked me to respond about my personal decisions in Brazil. I would say we're living a good moment. We're improving. We learn a lot how to reduce poverty, how to deal with macroeconomic policies. We know that we have to continue to introduce reforms. Reform is a vague notion if you don't have an issue. I agree with Ocampo that aspect. It's senseless to speak about a second wave, reform of second wave. What's that? I don't know. What kind of reform? It's not easy to do the main reforms. I mean, the tax reform, the political reform, the party system, and the system of vote is extremely difficult to implement, and social security reform. It's easy to speak about, extremely difficult to implement. It will be necessary to do something. I would say, and this in response to what has been asked me, if I could advise how to do it, I would say gradually. The idea that it will be possible to very quickly to introduce an enormous array of different kinds of reform will produce much more reaction than capacity to implement reforms. The Congress will be blocked by the different groups of people who oppose different reforms. You know, this is as old as Machiavelli. Those who will suffer from the negative consequence of the reform know since the beginning. Those who will be benefited never know. So it's very difficult to implement reform. So it's better to go more gradually. Not to imagine you can change everything immediately because it's not possible and not necessary. But we know too, and this has been repeated here, it's obvious that now that you have give access to practically everyone to the basic educational system, the main question is quality. I would say that probably in Latin America in the future, the main question will be related no more with quantity but with quality. It is much more difficult to get, including in terms of the money to invest in education or in health or in we have money. We don't know how to use this money. We don't know how to ask the private sector to come.
this has been said, I would like to stress. It would be impossible to go ahead without the private sector, but it would be impossible for the private sector to come without some degrees of confidence, stability in the rule of law, so on and so forth. And I will conclude by saying that since I believe, and this has been reviewed today here, that the main questions of the past are in the making to be solved. I would say that the new ones are more difficult to be solved. The new ones also have been referred here, is people's security, poor people's security, because of crime, because of violence, because of drug. There is no one reform to solve this. It's together. They have to increase income distribution, increase education, to offer a better justice system, judiciary system to people, to have a less corrupted police altogether. This is extremely difficult, and this is what is bothering the day by day of people. Now probably this is high, not probably, the last survey in 70 countries we did in Latin America, it's clear that number one problem is no more job, it's no more employment, it's personal security. And this is not for the rich people. The rich people, they know how to protect themselves. The poor people, because poor people are killing other people, poor people, all across the region. So these are the new problems. Let me put in a simple way, how to really believe that the law is equal for everyone. This is not true, clearly not true. Because up to today, the law exists in some circles for some people, for the enemies. For the friends, no. They have possibility to go around and to evade the rule of law. So I think that simple thing, democracy, that not in the sense of elections, party, but in the most central value, equality, at least facing law. The rule of law is equal for everyone. This is not true yet in Latin America. How can we believe that we'll be capable to enforce social equality if we don't have formal equality by law? It's impossible. So these are the new quest we have to face. This has to be stressed, and this requires a new leadership. This seminar refers to the new leaders. The new leaders have to be different ones from those of the past. The leaders from the past were dealing with hard economic problems and hard social problems. Now we have yet to have social problems, but maybe sophisticated new problems. How to fight corruption, how to enforce the justice, how to assure physical integrity to people, how to permit that teachers came into a school at the periphery of big city without fearing to be, in the hands of bandits. And even how to you assure that teachers, when teaching in some areas, will be not aggressed by students. That is the situation in several parts of Latin America. So I think that you have to move our minds from not to leave aside, because you have to continue to grow, you have to continue to solve our problems, but you have to also to make up our minds toward a new vision of what's really needed in our region to have a decent society. To a large extent, is a problem of values. I'm not an idealistic in Google sense. I'm not saying it's not important to grow. I'm not saying it's not important to have, expertise in how to. No, it's not that. But to have to add to this set of this agenda a new one, much more oriented toward values. We have to we need some kind of preachers being involved in the policy realm. Since I'm not a priest, I stop here.
President Cardoso, oops, this is not working. President Cardoso has agreed to answer questions, and we have people with microphones that are circulating among you. So let me first recognize someone right here, close to a microphone.
Hi, President. I would like to know, in your opinion, which policies Brazil should adopt to address corruption issues? A difficult one.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I don't know if that is, let's divide the question. We can maybe produce some betterment in the judicial system, political system, so on and so forth, in the controlling system. This is important. Brazil is trying to enforce several of these policies. We have an independent prosecutor system. We have inside the government several instruments to control, so on and so forth. But on top of that, corruption is also behavior. It's also a moral thing. Depends on persons. It's not just a question of regulations. It's also a moral thing. So in moral thing cannot be addressed through law. We took examples. The law can ensure control. You see? I would say this is one of the most challenging questions in Brazil, because you have different kinds of corruption. You have the small corruption, which undermines the day-by-day life. The police corruption, for instance. And you have the big one. As far as the big one is visible, very often not visible. But as far as it turns visible, immediately the effect is terrible, because the small one multiplies by 10. So I would say we have to try to stop the big one made by important people. And if in the case of this occur, we have to be strict in submitting people to the rules of law. And this never happened in Brazil. Maybe now it's beginning to, I don't know. But there is another question, and this has to be with the people's culture. Because very recently, as you know, we had several scandals in the Congress and maybe other parts of the political system. And some of those have been not indicted, but accused, blamed inside the Congress, decide to renounce in order to keep their political rights. And more recently, they become candidates, and they have been elected by people. In one case, one of these persons got 700,000 votes. So this is also, so it's not just a problem to say, well, it's a problem of the legal system. It's a problem of the orders of power. It's more profound than that. And this came because of kind of disenchantement, the lack of trust that people have vis-à-vis the political man. So everyone is equal. So I vote for him. At least this guy, I know him. I vote. He's a corrupt, but his friend. That is the culture. So the other day I was in a BBC program named Hard Talk. The interview was really very hard. And he was blaming me not to have changed the political culture in Brazil. Oh my God, political culture is a process. It cannot be changed by one person or by one decree. So, but this is a problem. That's why I conclude my remarks by saying, look, values now. You have to pay more attention to values, because this is a question of values, not just a question of law, a question of, it's more profound than that.
Yes, over here.
Mr. President, like your party has three main candidates for the presidency of Brazil: Geraldo Alckmin, José Serra, and Aécio Neves. And Brazil doesn't have primaries, so probably they will ask you by the end of the day who has to be the candidate. So you will have the power to decide the next president of Brazil. So among them, who would you support?
So you are asking me to elect the President of Brazil from here. If I had this power, I would immediately I would elect, but I don't have this power. The point is that, you see, in a competitive electoral system, the parties want to win elections. This is obvious. So they look after the public opinion polls. And every party is normally highly pragmatic. So not now, but more close to the electoral day, or not day, but the electoral year, among the three who have measured, maybe an additional one, I don't know, will be selected by the population. Let's say, well, so it's not no more necessary to have political leadership. No, it's not like that. It's a kind of interplay. The leadership will try to see, but have to have into account to what extent these names are being accepted. And some of them have already performed well, others are starting, so are good names. The point to my party is that we have too many candidates, and the other part don't have candidates. I don't know what is the worst situation. But the point is that we have good candidates, and probably the candidates will be formed by, step by step. I'm trustful that in spite of normal domestic disputes among these three candidates, well, they have enough maturity, and we know that without unity it will be impossible to win. So let's wait, and your opinion will be as important as mine.
As a former president and as a world-class sociologist, when you think back on your 8 years as presidency now, what do you think was the most important social reform that occurred, whether you in Brazil, and why do you think it happened, and what can we learn from that?
I would say it is difficult because we made several reforms in the social area. But probably the most important one was the decision about the education, how to change the budget, and how to change the interest of the federal government from the university system to the basic education. Because the university opposed, of course, so I was not popular among the federal university professors and institutes, maybe. But it was important for the nation because, in fact, we gave an enormous impulse to the primary education. I was a little bit doubtful because then we enforced what has been put on the Constitution and never have been really existent. It was the health system. Where really, during my period of government, it was possible to organize much better the health system in Brazil. And now, for good or for bad, something will complain, etc. But the point is that everyone has access to free medicine and treatment in Brazil. It takes time, it's not a good one, but anyhow, it's there. And let's say the third one was a decision about what now is called the Bolsa Familia. Bolsa Familia started as, it's a funny story because it started by demagoguery in Congress. One leader in Congress was asking for more money to give more food for population, and in his mind the idea was to mobilize the first ladies in Brazil to give food for people. It was an electoral approach. So we had a tremendous difficulty in dealing with this kind of thing, and finally to introduce a law increasing in the one tax to give money to stimulate education and to create the scholar fellowship, Bolsa Escola. Bolsa Escola had an enormous impact. It is the base for Bolsa Familia. We gave a Bolsa Escola to 5.5 families, provided the family had children attending schools.
And the idea was they had to be there for 85% of the schooling days, and this would be controlled by the Ministry of Education, by the Ministry of Education. And the money was given to the mother. This was also a very important decision to give the money to the mother, not to the father, because father is uncertain, the mother is not sure. And the father used to drink, and the mother's less. So, and this was important because of gender, because it gave a sense of responsibility to the woman. The woman became more important in the whole thing. But in both sides, as well as when we gave money for the primary education, we increased the wages of the teachers in the backward areas of Brazil. So the women normally are the teachers, so they become also more prestigious, and the mothers as well. So this is not, you cannot count the consequence of that, but I think it's very important, the decision to orient toward the woman. So we did that, and this increased eased the acceptance of our appeal to put the children attending schools. And this program, I mean, the direct cash transfer, I have to this morning, also some data have been presented to us, it was very important. Now it's Bolsa Familia. Lula doubled the number of people receiving this the cash, and including in the Bolsa Familia 3 or 4 different programs put all together. And now I had some doubts about the inclusiveness, because the control to see if effectively the children are attending schools is more loose now. And we had another program for pregnant ladies who, since they had to be attended by the public health service during the pregnancy. Provided they have been there, they receive some money. So all this disappeared. They have one label, Bolsa Familia, and it's really difficult to control what for is this money used, and to what extent we are overextending the program. But anyhow, it's positive. Anyhow, it's positive. The data are very clear that to reduce poverty, they have a very important role. So this is starting in my period too. I don't know, probably it's 3.
I think we have time for.
I would have said the same thing.
We have time for 2 or 3 more questions, so I think we'll take them all at once, and then we'll ask President Cardoso to conclude. The first one is here. Yes.
Hello, President. I'm Daniel from São Paulo. I'm a visiting scholar to Columbia Law School. And my question is regarding the privatization. It seems difficult to me only to evaluate it on basis of the assets and the profits, because there are other implications. And I would like to ask you about one of such implications, which is the corruption that we usually connect to the public sector. But actually, there are many corruption events that happen because of the private sector, as we know nowadays in Brazil, trying to buy some politicians over there. So my question is, how could we change if we could change the contributions that today is based on private sector contributions to a public system, as it is defended by some professors, just like Bandeira de Mello or others?
I don't understand how. What are
the contributions for politicians, for campaigns? If it would be easier for us to think about changing the system.
Yeah, okay.
To public finances. Okay. Let's get a couple of more questions. One down here. One in the back.
Dr. Cardoso, I gather from what you said that for a country to be successful, it has to set a national agenda, to have goals, as you said, to implement policies that will enforce the goals and to have continuity. Okay. Now, you can argue that in order to do that, you need a certain degree of political or social consensus to set the agenda and to move in that direction. So the question is this. We see that there are some countries in which you don't have the consensus in Latin America. So in the absence of that consensus, do you think that reflects the failure of the political leadership? Or do you think that that's a reflection of the political culture, that that some countries are immature in that respect and cannot reach an agreement?
Okay. In the back?
Yes, Mr. President, I was wondering what your thoughts and opinions were on the creation of the South American Union, and more specifically, Brazil's role in that.
And last question, there was a young lady right here who's looking, yes.
Well, it was just,
Yes.
it was the same question about, that you asked. It just,
The same question then, and the other lady right here.
The economic aspect of that would be interesting.
Yes, it is one.
You commented that a lot of Brazilian companies are expanding into the areas like the U.S. and other countries. Can you comment a little about what challenges that the Brazilian multinationals have, and also the opportunities that they're pursuing and how that will impact Brazil?
The impact in Brazil?
No. Outside.
Outside. Brazilians.
So the Brazilian multinational companies.
So let's go. First, the question, you are mixing up the questions about the privatization. One thing is privatization, other thing is corruption. Other thing is that the private sector is supporting corruption. This is an old story. The private sector always supported corruption for political purpose in every country in the world, and this is bad. You have to have rules to control, so on and so forth. The rules exist in Brazil are very clear. The private sector people, individuals, as well as corporations, can give money for political party and for campaigns. Provide this money is listed and sent to the tribunal, it's okay. So why not? That's the question. Why they do in a different way? For different reasons. The first one is because of the so-called caixa dois, that is to say, money put aside by the enterprise. So they prefer to give money, not putting on the books. So from the point of view of the political man or the political party, well, the money is money. So the starting point of corruption in that sense is not coming from the political system. It exists already inside, as you said, the private sector. Well, this is one of the elements. So. What occurred more recently in Brazil is a quite different thing. It's not during the electoral campaign. It's inside the Congress. And this was not coming from the private sector. Some people in the publicity area used money coming from government. And they made false deals with these contractors, and the contractors gave the money to the parties, to the government, or to the party, to buy votes in Congress. It's not public, it came from the Banco do Brasil, among others. You see? So it was a tricky thing they utilized, so it's corruption. It's not by changing law regarding the finance of campaign. As I said, it's a problem of behavior. You have to, as far as it has been unveiled, you have to punish these people. Hopefully, now the Supreme Court accepted the indictment by the fiscal general attorney, something like that, in Brazil, and now they are under trial. But that had nothing to do with privatization. Stop it. Another thing is to imagine that during the process of privatization was some corruption. This has been said, but never, not just proved, but never really substantiated in a trial or something like that. These are rumors coming from those who oppose privatization. These are not, because the privatization in Brazil has been done through public auctions. So public competition. How can it be? It's impossible to have, impossible. Never. But anyhow, it's difficult to utilize, corruption to get a result there. Well, then the question you asked me about the failure of political leadership. I would say is a mix of all that. You have the political culture. You have undoubtedly a failure of political leadership, because let's be put another way. When I finished my second term, and Lula was about to be elected, was elected. We made a very smooth transition. And even before the election,
in January, I decided, and one of my ministers, whose son is here, Pedro Parente, came to America. He was chief of staff then, and to see the main mechanisms and policies used here in order to have a more normal transitional period. And I sent to I didn't send to Congress. I did an executive order, something like that, saying, well, the new president is allowed to appoint 70 people, and I will accept them as part of the federal government before the inauguration day, in such a way that it will be possible to transmit our information to the new group, so on and so forth. And we did lots of things like that. And more than that, I offered to President Lula to live in one of the presidential residences in Brasilia. And he accepted. So from time to time, we had lunch together, or dinner together, like at my residential palace. And once I pay a visit to him in his residential palace. So it was very, very, if I can put like a highly civilized transmission of power. So it was a good moment to converge. Why not? Why not? So this was our failure, since I put myself in the game. So to some extent, there is a failure of leadership to understand that it's important to converge. I know that's much more difficult than that, because there are entrenched interests in each party, etc., and so on and so forth. On the other hand, I would say, in also answering about the situation, I'm not saying that because of that it's impossible to go ahead. Brazil is very clear. In Brazil, we are making progress. We are reducing poverty and inequality, which is really surprising. In this case, since 1994, we start by reducing poverty and unevenness, income disparities. So, in spite of all things, I said we could be better if we have been capable to work together. But this is not a fundamental obstacle. And I must say that I'm not saying that democracy is not a system to provide consensus. It's to provide rules to solve disputes. Not consensus, not necessary. I think it eases the process if people who are more or less have close views can be together. But those who have close views, and not to say that if a country is not homogeneous, not to be possible to go ahead. No. In a complex society and in democracy, you have disputes, you have clash of interests. But I think that in some cases could be possible. And this has been coming step by step. The other day, I was here in the United States, and I received a Brazilian newspaper, and President Lula was celebrating the fact that his government is doing better than my government in terms of public concession of roads, concession to the private sector. So, wonderful! He's celebrating privatization. He opposed all time by saying that this is bad for the country. Now he's celebrating the fact that he's done better than me. Oh, wonderful! So in that case, we are making consensus in spite of the differentiation. In some cases, we already have consensus in Brazil. No one in Brazil will believe that it's not important to have an eye on inflation. No one in Brazil. To my surprise, again, the finance minister from Lula said to me, I will increase the primary surplus. I said, my God, what's that? You are exaggerating more than IMF is asking you. And they did. So this is important because anyhow a consensus is being made. It's a consensus now that education is priority number one. Not just among the political people. I would say that political people are not that enlightened. But in society, in Brazilian society, there is a consensus in Brazil. We don't know yet how to do. This morning was a very good discussion about the quality of education, because our problem now is how to improve the quality of education. What the instruments are available to improve the quality of education. But this is a
already there in the national agenda. I would say, if you look Mexico, probably Mexicans now have to understand that for them it will be necessary to go ahead with some transformations, to continue to make reform. It's really important for Mexico to go ahead without increasing the tax system and the fiscal pressure in Mexico. They cannot rely on oil and to use oil as a substitute for taxes. This is not, at long run, we will ruin the oil company without giving really a sound base for social policies in Mexico. So this is already become a consensus there too. Look what is happening now in Uruguay. Who said this? One of you today. You said that. To put together tobacco como Vázquez, Tabaré Vázquez, with Lula, with Calderón, and with Adorno. Well, this could be, what's that? And that's true. In some sense, not in all sense. In some sense it's true, because they have the sense of public responsibility vis-a-vis public money. It makes a difference. They have differences, of course. They're quite different in terms of the way how believe that the society has to be, how much to expand in that. They have different, but they have consensus, and since all of them are responsible vis-a-vis the public expenses. So I think that is the way that step by step we're trying to reorganize our agenda. So now about the global about global companies in Brazil. In Brazil, in other parts, Ambassador Munoz gave an example. It's true. It's really very impressive, the number of global companies coming from Latin America, not to speak about the Mexican, who is supposed to be the richest man in the world, and he is also becoming global. He has telecommunication across the region. But not just that, the steel corporation. We have several steel corporations, Brazilian steel corporations, who are very influential. Even here, you are in lots of companies, and mining, someone prefer to mine, but textiles, so on and so forth. What is the importance of that for the nation? What is the importance in order to become global? You have to be at front run in terms of technology. You have to be very creative. You cannot be, count only on protection. You have to compete, and you have to be. To compete, you have to introduce new technologies. You have to look quality of your people in Brazil and abroad. You have to see what kind of engineering you have, what kind of administration you have in your company, so on and so forth. So it's very important for the reshaping of our culture, the fact that they will have several companies which are acting globally, because this also changes, mentalities in our countries. Once I said to the man I appointed as for the presidents of central bank, and as in America, the president of central bank has to go to the Senate and have to be interviewed by senators there. And so it was Arminio Fraga, was my second president of central bank. I said, take care, Arminio. You go to the Senate, and you have to have in your mind that every one of our Brazilian senators hates the capitalist system. They hate. They don't know that they hate, but they hate the capitalist system. They are not socialists. No, they don't. They are distrustful vis-a-vis socialism. They like government, and they like to appoint people as public employees. So they don't like competition. They like protection. So this is our old tradition, our patrimonialistic tradition coming from the Iberian world. See? So as far as we have now global companies, this clashes with that tradition, practically. So this force everyone to have different views about how the nation has to be organized, and what are the main instruments to give more strength to your people, to your nation. Your national interests, I stress, each one has national interests, but our national interest has to be rewritten
right in modern days, not as in the past. And the fact that we are competing, that you are acting globally, is like you here, being here. You are learning different ways of, I say, oh, it's okay also the Americans go there, it's true, to learn reciprocally, and to open up our eyes, our mentality. That is the way I think is important. The importance, apart from profits, the cultural importance of having this kind of new animals operating at the world level. Finally, the question vis-a-vis South America and alliance, I don't know, has been stressed today here with the property that Mercosur is a very important instrument to accommodate our external relations. I must remember you that in the past, if you look at the borderline between Brazil and Argentina, part of our borderline is a river. We have only one bridge. You know why? To prevent the invasion. And the Brazilian army was to the south. I know that my father was a general. I mean, several of my family lived there in the south. My father used to speak like Portuñol because he was living in front borderline to protect Brazil. Well, so now every time a president or governor goes to the borderline, several small cities are asking for more bridges. More bridges. And in the past, our roads were not paved in the south to prevent invasion. So it's a complete transformation. So now the relation between Brazil and Argentina are quite from a quite different nature. Quite different nature. And this comes from President Alfonsín and President Sarney, that you say the middle of the 80s. Up to the middle of the 80s. Was not like that. So when the Mercosur came, was a kind of reaffirmation of our will to live together. Politically is very important. It's crucial for our future. Then we made some mistakes, maybe putting too much accent on trade, then other thing. I don't go elaborate on that. Now we're having that in South America, other views. You have ALBA, which is proposed by President Chavez, my good friend. The point is true. It's true. The point is that Chavez has a different view. He wants to organize the region against. Mercosur was not against. Mercosur was an instrument to do together some things. And when I remember that when Madeleine Albright said that Mercosur would be an impediment for FTAA, and President Clinton came to Brazil, I had a conversation with Clinton alone. I said, "It's a mistake because we need Mercosur. If you say that Mercosur prevents the possibility of FTAA, so FTAA is dead." So Clinton said, "What do you think? You think it's okay if I make a declaration or say something in favor of Mercosur?" Wonderful. And he said. So Mercosur was not conceived as something to prevent. It was maybe a step to allow in better conditions. Maybe it was not that good enough. That was the idea. ALBA is different. The proposal by Chavez is something to be isolated. It's another way. So then there is another program which is more political. I don't remember the name, but Latin America had always the idea to put new names in all ideas. But anyhow, they make in Machu Picchu, in Cardoso, I don't know what, to produce a new coalition, so on and so forth. So the point is that the truth is that never had a so fragmented Latin America. But that is not to say, I agree to complete what has been said by Munoz. But the fact that we are fragmented, and we are, cannot say that we don't have commonalities, and cannot say that we have to fight each other. That is to say, if Chavez proposed ALBA, okay, I think that Brazil never will enter in such a thing, because cannot. Not because of ideology, because of interests. We are much more integrated, yet diversified, integrated. Well, impossible for us to have. But I understand that some countries, some people, because of what has been said and because everyone knows, have no big alternatives. And since Venezuela, in spite of being based only in oil, since the oil price is so high, well, to dream is not prohibited. Let Chavez dream that he will organize ALBA, and ALBA will make an alliance with OPEC. And ALBA with OPEC will destroy the United States and China together. And not to allow Brazilians to have ethanol. Okay, this I understand, but I think that we have not to become nervous because of that, and we never have to let aside the sense of belongingness. We do belong to South America. We do belong to Latin America. So we have something in common, in spite of all that fragmentation. And what we have in common cannot be supposed as an instrument to be against. It's an instrument to allow us to have better possibilities at the global level. I concluded that. I think that now, let's move from a more general consideration. I think that now, in the coming 10 to 20 years, I don't like to say that because it remembers Jaguaribe also. If you don't do that in 10 years, you will be killed. No, it's not like that. But anyhow, I think that in the coming years, and this Ambassador Munoz knows better than me, in the coming years we don't be capable to organize the world in a better way. It will be difficult to avoid the continuity of wars. Not big wars, but wars. And you have to understand that the world, as we change it in South America, others change it much more quickly than us. So now, Russia is a power again, based on energy, but it's a power again. China, not know what to say about China. It is obvious that it's impossible to impose on the Muslims our way of life. It's impossible. The war is not a good instrument to force them to change, because they are ready to give their lives. Who among us will do that? To be a suicide bomber? Who? And they have thousands. So we cannot do. So probably we have to renegotiate the World Pact, a global contract again. And unfortunately, the United Nations has been weakened by the United States and by China, by everyone, because they prefer to have the power equilibrium as it is, but probably impossible. And then I think ALBA, Mercosur, our experience in dealing with people in Latin America, our capacity to compromise, our capacity to understand the multiplicity, our acceptation of diversity could help, because the world will need such an approach. And this could be maybe one of our Latin American contributions to the rebuilding of the world equilibrium in the coming years, provide, well, leadership. That's the key question. And you Americans have an enormous responsibility, because you are about to select new leaders. And this is crucial for the world. I used to say, I think that the President of the United States should be elected by everyone, not just by Americans. I don't know if the result will be better or worse. I have